Hey, it's the Line Podcast. New White House foreign policy just dropped, and we'll go over it with you right now. Us to you, our fellow American subjects. So I was having a pretty calm day.
Until I started frantically emailing you excerpts before this podcast started.
I had no one to blame. So I woke up this morning and I'm thinking, we got a couple of columns already in the bank for next week. We had a podcast today. Rob Shaw, it's on readtheline.ca. Check it out. He's on top of the wild situation in BC. And I had a few errands to run today, just household stuff I want to get done. And I thought to myself, you know what? Today's going to be an easy one. Today is the day where I can
bash this out. It's going to be great.
Take the morning off,
no problem.
Run those errands, come back, do a quick podcast on domestic Canadian issues. And then the White House releases a new foreign policy document.
New foreign policy just dropped.
It's not that long.
I think just off the top, like, we have some thoughts. About the American.
Say, can you see?
So let's just explain what this is. What exactly just dropped here, and can we give the audience like a 30-second précis of what this thing is?
All right, I'm going to watch the timer here. Let's see if I can do this in exactly 30 seconds.
30 seconds. You're a professional. Make it happen.
All right. 3, 2, 1. Every White House or normally will come out with kind of a combined defense and foreign policy document. It sets national strategic goals, national strategic priorities, identifies emerging threats or continued threats, and identifies national responses to address those threats. Very routine, fairly normal. A lot of them in recent years have been responding to things like climate change or the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, global terrorism, Russian imperialism. This new one is similar in concept, but it's a lot different otherwise. That was 32 seconds.
That was excellent. So can we just give our audience a few highlight reels, like a few highlight pieces of things from this document so that they get a sense of the overall tenor and tone?
Well, so let me start with the part I think it's important to start with. Some of it makes perfect sense. Like, some of this document identifies genuine foreign policy concerns that every American should be concerned about.
And to give you an example of that, just the highlight reel is, for example, the Trump White House is very concerned with the sense that a lot of the Western allies are freeloading on American defense spending. While you guys are spending all your money on these elaborate welfare states, America, you can only afford to do that because America has this extraordinarily large industrial or military industrial complex. We are expecting the rest of the NATO states to start, picking their share up, spending more money on defense. This is a long-standing grievance of America, and in both of our opinion, it is a correct and morally valid grievance.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. Okay. The Americans are right about that. And
right.
One of the things I think regular Line Podcast viewers and listeners know, I'm no fan of Donald Trump, but I've always been very clear on that issue. He is 100% correct. And it's very uncomfortable for Canadians, given other things we'll get to in a minute, to kind of admit that he's right about anything.
Right.
But I think Trump and MAGA is right 20 to 30% of the time. And this is this document in the middle of that.
This document is a really beautiful example of the fact that they're right 20 to 30% of the time. So
can I give you another example?
Yeah,
because you talked about some of the highlights. There are other things in this I agree with. Like, for instance, they are pretty aggressive about calling out China for basically using its economic and cultural power to force countries to have more of a mercantilist system where, like, there is to be a China plus economy, and we're all going to be on the outside of that. They identify critical minerals and rare earths as choke points where non-friendly nations can put the screws to us because we don't have domestic supply. There's some stuff. So I think we would agree with all of that.
Sure.
I think they have correctly identified, and I don't say this endorsing blowing up any people clinging to a raft, but I think they're correct about flows of drugs. They're correct about intellectual property theft, something else. Again, they're pointing at China. There are a few things in there.
For once, the Canadians in the room are arguing against war crimes. I mean, this is a thing.
I think there's part of the document as well, I think we can skip past it quickly, that I'm going to say is controversial but fair. Like, I think there are things in there about deindustrialization, immigration patterns, things that I think reasonable people can debate whether the problem is as bad as we say or what the solution should be, but that I don't think it's crazy for them to be in this document. Like, these are things we should be concerned about. And then there's stuff in the document.
And then there's the other 70% of the document. So here's where I have concerns. One is that there's firstly, this document is highly propagandistic. There's stuff that's being stated very explicitly here, and then there's a lot of stuff that is not quite dog whistling because it's not that subtle.
More
but
like
there's clearly
foghorning.
More like foghorning. The sort of we'll get into a lot of it when we get into the Europe section in particular, which I think is going to take the top headline. But there's some stuff in here that is patently ahistoric. For example, the Americans in this document complain about the fact that there is a perception that they are getting dragged against their will into forever wars by these recalcitrant ally states who aren't, putting up their own defense spending kind of thing, right? That's bullshit. Nobody's dragged America into a military engagement, arguably since the Second World War. And is there a reason why we're relitigating that? Thank you very much. If anything, the exact opposite is true. It's the allies that have been historically dragged into America's forever wars. Hello, Canada. Would like to have a word for a moment.
Jen, you remember that time the Americans found themselves at war in Afghanistan and Iraq because of the 9/11 attacks on Barcelona and Antwerp?
Yeah, there you go. The rest of the NATO nations, including us, came to America's aid after 9/11 and got involved with the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. I will note the war in Iraq especially was sold to the international community on false intelligence about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq that was, promoted by then Secretary of Defense or State, Colin Powell. Anyway, point being, like, the exact the narrative that they're trying to portray is, us poor Americans been dragged into these wars. The exact opposite has been true. It's been our nations that have been dragged into your forever wars, not the other way around. And we have the dead and injured friends to prove it. And I believe we both have dead and injured friends as a result of our involvement in Afghanistan. So that pissed me off quite a lot. Secondly, there's a lot of stuff in this document that is internally contradictory. So there's sections, for example, where it's effectively saying we're going to try and discourage people from developing closer ties to that country over there, which we all know is China. And we're going to do that by pointing out that if you put your chips on American hegemony, we're not like China. We don't have strings attached. We're not going to engage in spying on you and all that kind of stuff, right? I'm like, aren't you? Because the document that you're laying out here pretty much suggests openly that there are going to be some strings attached no matter which global power we align ourselves with. Yeah. This is literally the strings attached document. So you can't...
We get to pick which string, and we might have its say in where it's attached, but I'm not convinced about that.
Well, precisely. So you can't go around and say America's such a better bet for you to be putting your chips behind. So much better than China. Unlike China, we don't engage in human rights abuses, and we're not transactional, and there are no strings attached when you come on board with America. Come read our happy document, which talks about,
all the ways we're going to break you and fold you into a Pax Americana mercantilist empire. That thing.
So there's that. The last thing I just right off the top, and we're going to get into more detail about all of this in a moment, but a lot of this document is fantastic. And by that, I mean, it is born in fantasy. We're going to talk a little bit more about its perceptions of Europe in a minute here, but it's clear that this is a version of the world that is heavily informed by a right-wing American media ecosystem.
Yeah.
And while the right-wing American ecosystem is worth keeping on track of and understanding to have a sense of where people's perceptions are at, it's not total reality. I mean, the reality is often much more nuanced and much more careful and much more interesting. If I were to take my perceptions about Canada and build an entire foreign policy around how I, as an American, should be dealing with Canada as a result of my understandings of Canada from the Joe Rogan podcast, that is not going to give me the best baseline of understanding about what's real, what's not real, and what may be a little overstated, and what the problems are and what the problems aren't. Right? I'm not going to be making the best foreign policy decisions based on that, which is not to say that the Joe Rogan podcast's criticisms of Canada are all totally inaccurate or invalid. It's just that it's one version of reality. It's not the version of reality. So
yeah, it's like I said before, some of it's right, some of it's arguable, some of it's batshit.
Yeah.
And it's now all of like, so let's just for ease of like simplicity, let's just go a third of it's correct, a third of it's insane. It's all now official White House policy.
Yes.
So okay.
if there's one thing I would say that I like having this off the bat, can we please bring the era of illusion to an end? Like, if you are a decision maker in Canada today, you need to read this document 3 times over and then backwards, and you need to get your head out of your ass because
request denied.
They're spelling out the way they see the world and what they plan to do in it clearly and explicitly in black and white. You can no longer be in denial about this anymore. And I will also increasingly no longer be tolerating but the midterms will come in a year and everything will be back to normal. Nothing's going back to normal. This is the reality now. And I increasingly think that some version of this, hopefully with 20% of the batshit removed, will become official Democrat policy in 5 years. So this is how you have to understand these people are understanding the world around them. Period.
I'm going to go whimsical for just a minute here, but I'm going to entertain you.
And then we're really going to dig in.
Did you watch The West Wing?
You know what? I've never watched The West Wing.
There was a great episode. It's a cold open with a character, and it was a new character, and he's playing the White House counsel, the top White House lawyer. And the cold open is him in his office talking with his staff about how his tape recorder, the thing he carries around to record memos, it got stuck on, and he can't stop it from recording. He's like, yeah, we better get this fixed. And they're kind of joking, hey, bad place to have that happen, right? A bunch of lawyers in the White House, and they can't stop recording each other. And at that moment, the president walks in unannounced and confesses having possibly committed a staggeringly serious crime. And then the lawyer just does a slow pan to the recorder on his desk, and he picks up his ceremonial gavel and he just smashes it. And it's a very funny cold open. The reason I bring this up is because last night I was organizing my office. Very exciting, scintillating podcast content. One of the things I found shoved into one of my book nooks was a book on the Monroe Doctrine and American foreign policy in the 19th century.
The synchronicities abound.
And then I put it on my desk, and I'm like, I'm going to decide whether or not I'm going to reread this, or if I'm going to put it on a proper bookshelf and then not look at it for another 20 years. And then about an hour ago, I'm eating lunch, and Jen's texting me and sending me snippets of this new U.S. foreign policy document. And my eyes just pivoted to look at the book on the Monroe Doctrine sitting on my desk. I didn't smash it with a gavel, but I thought about it because this document, Jen, is not subtle. It directly cites the Monroe Doctrine. Would you like a refresher for your 19th century history?
I would, but firstly, I would like to point out is that chatter about the Monroe Doctrine and everything that's been in this policy has been more or less talked about for the last year or so. So neither Matt or I read this thing and was shocked that anything here was in it. This is stuff we've been talking to you about for some time. But Matt, yes, the strategy document directly cites the Monroe Doctrine and says we're going to create a Trumpian version of the Monroe Doctrine.
Yeah, the Trump corollary.
Please, I'm gonna lean on you, history nerd, military history nerd. Explain to us briefly, 45 seconds or less, Monroe Doctrine.
the Monroe Doctrine was President James Monroe who issued a doctrine that basically said the United States will not tolerate imperialism in the Western Hemisphere. It was, I mean, the terms being used in the 19th century don't directly translate to now, but effectively what it meant was that the United States would not allow European colonialism and imperialism within North or South America. The United States basically said, this is in our sphere of influence. A notable exception was the recognition of British sovereignty over what became Canada. And frankly, at the time, the British had the firepower to go to war with America and probably win if it came down to it, or at least give them a good fight. So Canada was sort of recognized as an exception. But the United States were not prepared to tolerate foreign imperialist colonial interference anywhere in North and South America. Spain is not currently trying to reconquer Mexico. The Portuguese have given up on Brazil. So it doesn't really matter anymore. And the British, frankly, would sell us out for like a basket of fish and chips. But the reason you and I and others have been talking about the Monroe Doctrine in recent years is because China has been spending massively to develop resource projects and infrastructure in South and Central America. You and I, about a year ago, the Line podcast hit like peak Panama content because we were talking about how the Americans all of a sudden were talking a lot about the Panama Canal. And one of the things we found out they were upset about was the Chinese were building huge dock and port and warehouse facilities on either side of the Panama Canal. And the Americans basically got to the point of going, at a certain point, China's going to have de facto control over the canal unless we reassert ourselves. The Panamanians got the message real quick. They canceled those contracts with the Chinese, and they are playing ball with the Americans again. This is relevant to Canada, Jen, because 200 years ago, we had the Royal Navy on our side, and that would be a fair fight or better against the United States. Can I note simply, and I'll yield the floor back to Jen, things have changed in 2 centuries?
Okay, so here's what I'm saying. I don't think that Matt and I are implying here that America is going to literally take over Canada or literally take over South America. If anything, what I'm implying from the Canadian context is somewhat worse. What we're saying here is these guys are now pretty much explicitly saying we will no longer tolerate any sort of interference in our sphere of influence. And all of the Western Hemisphere is considered our sphere of influence. So this is the ironic thing is that while America wants to assert its sovereignty and domination, it can't seem to be able to do that without quietly and implicitly undermining the sovereignty of the countries who share the Western Hemisphere, including ourselves. Yes. What they are laying out here for Canada is more or less explicitly a statement of expectation of subjugation. Yep. Okay, so they're stating clearly that they expect us to consider ourselves a vassal state, that they will use their own sort of economic might to deter any other state from having too much of an influence in our affairs and our economy, and that they expect us to become clients, right? And, we can manage our own internal domestic nonsense as long as it doesn't interfere with their interests.
Would you like me to read the only mention of Canada in the document?
Sure, go for it. Canada's only mentioned once.
This is exactly to Jen's point. And just for people who follow along at home, this is on page 22 of the text of the document, or page 26 of the PDF. America First diplomacy seeks to rebalance global trade relationships. We have made clear to our allies that America's current account deficit is unsustainable. We must encourage Europe, Japan, Korea, Australia, Canada, Mexico, and other prominent nations in adopting trade policies that help rebalance China's economy toward household consumption. Because Southeast Asia, Latin America, and the Middle East cannot alone absorb China's enormous excess capacity. And it goes on and on and on to talk about some other stuff.
As a practical matter, what that actually means for Canada?
Well, it means America's basically, you know what it means, Jen? It means it's recess and America just went out and called its team.
No, what it means is effectively we are going to be economically punished for the crime of selling America too much of our oil. because that's actually what. No, I'm serious.
Yeah,
that's literally what it means. Because the reason why our trade the account balance is so out of whack, a huge part of that is because we sell them shit tons of oil. That's what drives up the account balance being so out of whack.
We can't have that,
right? So because we have economically tied ourselves into the North American energy market, forcing ourselves, because we can't build a pipeline to any of our coasts, we have tied ourselves into the North American energy market. We drive up our account balance, our account trade imbalance here as a result of that, because we sell them a bunch of our oil at a discount, which they then can resell and make money off of. But fine, cool, we've made that decision ourselves. But because that's put us in a perpetual imbalance situation, they're now going to punish us by imposing trade tariffs. That's what that means. So, and also when they talk about reindustrialization and all that kind of thing, what they're saying here is we don't want Canada to have an auto sector.
We want it.
Period. We want your auto sector. And because we're the larger dominant power, we can take it. That is the scenario. If we're really lucky,
though, if we're really lucky and if they're very nice, we'll keep an auto parts sector.
Maybe, but probably not. Because those are good American jobs, not good Canadian jobs. No. Like, look, this is a policy that if we were to take that lying down would turn us into, essentially, this is an imperialist policy. This is America embracing every single caricature that every Noam Chomsky lefty has made of it for the last 40 years. Okay.
They were wrong then, but maybe they weren't wrong. Maybe they're just early.
They were just early. Like, this is an imperial policy that seeks to turn countries like Canada into subject nations whose sole purpose is basically to provide America with material assets at trade scenarios and in trade agreements that are perpetually rigged in favor of the dominant power. And like that is being spelled out very clearly here. That is the scenario we're in. And if you've been following what Americans and what trade representatives in America have been saying for the last year, that shouldn't surprise you. I'm just really emphasizing this because people in Canada need to get this through their heads.
We are to be providers of resources and I suspect janissaries, which is basically troops.
Yeah. And guess what? You want to be the 51st state? No, because we won't have a vote. Yeah. We don't have a say in actually how decisions get made in the larger empire state. We're a subject nation. That's the way we're being talked about and treated.
I mean, talking about Monroe and the doctrine, like there has been a desire in some elements of America to have the United States absorb the Canadian territory for 200 years. Not much recently. So I do think there's going to be a faction of MAGA that will desire Canadian annexation, not because they have any particular fondness for Canadians, but because they like how big the United States would then be on a map. And
yes, but then they would have to take all of those people with them, and those people are suspect and woke. So they're not going to go with that. They would set the
terms of our engagement.
Yeah. And this is what I'm trying to scream at people who think that separatism is a good idea in Alberta. Well, we would be better off as Americans. You aren't going to be Americans, sweetheart. Yeah. You're going to be Puerto Rico del Norte. You aren't going to get a vote, and you're not going to get mobility. I mean, this goes back to a column that I'm fermenting in the back of my head. It's federalism or death, people. That's the reality. And
we're going to vote.
I'm sorry. Read the document. There's this ain't subtle. It's being spelled out for us really clearly. So anyway, look, we talked a little bit about the Monroe document. We want to get into the Europe section. I think that's important. But firstly, Matt, your conclusions about the long-term viability of NATO after reading this.
So I'll answer that question, but I'll say it also, and I'm going to echo something you said a minute ago, Jen. My thoughts on NATO are exactly in line with my thoughts of this entire document. Nothing here surprises me. You and I and others, full credit due, we have been saying this for over a year. We have listened to what the people around Trump have been saying. We've listened to what Trump is saying. We've been reading the things they've been reading. You and I are not immersed in the right-wing ecosystem, but I think we understand it. They're just putting it down in one concise document for our convenience. Yes. All of this stuff is exactly what they've been saying for a while. And you and I have written entire columns and had entire podcasts where we've been responding to some elements of it. Oh, here's a piece on the trade front. Here's a piece on the defense front. So and to answer your actual question, if NATO is to exist, it will exist as a European auxiliary to American military power. I don't know if the Europeans are going to be into that. So NATO is an interesting thing because it has all these existing institutions and whatnot. And I wouldn't be shocked if some version of it continues. Like we continue to have annual summits and everybody shows up and there's great food. But if the Europeans aren't looking at this and going, fuck, we're on our own, they really, really ought to be. And I think this is kind of where we do make that pivot, Jen, to you want to talk specifically about the European sections of this document. There is no good news to be found for Europe in this document. And if they're smart, they will take the right conclusions from that. And I'll say this, Jen, my gut feeling is the Europeans are smarter than we are. So I think they will look at this document and draw the right conclusions. But I yield the floor back to you. What the hell do you want to talk about first?
Well, look, the craziest parts of this strategy are coming in the Europe section. It's very clear that the Trump administration and a lot of people on the right in America have a perception of Europe as it being a woke hellhole that is currently being mobbed by a kind of Muslim invader state or Muslim invaders, and that the fundamental character of Europe is being fatally and existentially undermined as a result of this. Again, if you have any familiarity with the right-wing media ecosystem, you understand exactly where that perception is coming from. There is a sense, actually, the word white people and white race are not used explicitly, but there are sections of this document that talk about effectively like the white people who signed NATO are no longer running the show. And so therefore are the brown people who are taking Europe over, can they be trusted to hold to this military alliance? I mean, people will say, oh, that's an exaggerated interpretation of what's in. No, that's not an exaggerated interpretation of what's in this document. There is an implicit ethno-state argument being made in this document that is shaping perceptions here and shaping decisions about the way that America is going to move forward in terms of how it treats Europe.
Would you like me to read you a section of this, Jen?
Sure, go for it.
This is from page 25 of the document, and I'm going to skip some sentences here. I'm just kind of hitting the high points. American officials have become used to thinking about European problems in terms of insufficient military spending and economic stagnation. There is truth to this, but Europe's real problems are even deeper. Then I'm skipping, talks about declining share of global GDP. But this economic decline is eclipsed by the real and more stark prospect of civilizational erasure. The larger issues facing Europe include activities of the European Union and other transnational bodies that undermine political liberty and sovereignty, migration policies that are transforming the continent and creating strife, censorship of free speech and suppression of political opposition, cratering birth rates, the loss of national identities, and self-confidence. Should present trends continue, the continent will be unrecognizable in 20 years or less. As such, it is far from obvious whether certain European countries will have economies and militaries strong enough to remain reliable allies. Many of these nations are currently doubling down on their present path. We want Europe to remain European, to regain its civilizational self-confidence, and to abandon its failed focus on regulatory suffocation. Okay, there's more, but I think that's
look. I mean, the thing is, almost all of that section is straightforward American projection. This is America projecting its own white replacement theory fears and its own feelings of civilizational shift and impermeability onto Europe and reflecting it back. Like it is 100% American projection. That section. It is a reflection of what America fears is happening within themselves.
Let me read you two more sentences. This is a few paragraphs later. America is understandably sentimentally attached to the European continent and, of course, to Britain and Ireland. The character of these countries is also strategically important because we count upon creative, capable, confident democratic allies to establish conditions of stability and security. We want to work with aligned countries that want to restore their former greatness. And then skip down a couple of paragraphs, and this is the key sentence, Jen. Over the long term, it is more than plausible that within a few decades at the latest, certain NATO members will become majority non-European. As Jen said, they don't say white people, but that's not subtle.
Also, I would go with yet. The other thing I would just say is America right now is in no position to be casting any moral stones around issues of censorship or cracking down on political dissent. We are now in a place where the enemies or perceived enemies of the president are being literally charged on trumped up charges. We're talking about, America is now forcibly removing people and taking them to, El Salvadorian prisons. We're talking about, I don't know if I just sent you this other thing from the White House. The White House itself as an official channel is now cracking down on media and journalistic figures whom it claims are purveyors of disinformation and campaign. Like they're starting campaigns against journalists and journalistic outlets. I mean, specific,
like they're naming individual journalists and their outlets.
You just kicked a bunch of people, a bunch of credible journalists out of the Pentagon White House pool because they wouldn't sign your agreement to report on issues the way you wanted them to. I mean, again, I just go back to that entire section is American projection on a page. That's all that is. And that's before I even get into trying to parse what's happening in Europe and what if that is true and versus not true versus perception versus reality. All I read when I read that is like that is America projecting its shadow and its feared shadow onto another global power. And and then writing about it without being self-aware enough to recognize that that's what it's doing.
A lot of what they say about Europe is true. But to Jen's point, like it is the American story too. And what I was thinking, I think, Jen, you've really done, I think, credit to you. You've done a great job on this podcast, kind of drawing the link between if you spend a lot of times either immersed in or even just aware of kind of the American right-wing social media ecosystem, this document really fits. I agree with that, but I want to underline one part of it here. You and I have talked a lot about this, and we're starting to see more and more of our contributors writing about it too. Not so much what we would call social conservatism, which was focused on sort of religious values, but cultural conservatism. Like this is like a really interesting divide that's opening up right now. This document enshrines as White House policy what I would say is the consensus view on cultural issues of the American right. And I would say specifically the very online American right.
Yeah.
There is truth in some of this.
Oh,
some of this stuff is true.
There is a rise of nativist parties in many places in Europe, Britain, France, all these places, as a direct result of some of the issues that this document has pointed out.
Absolute failures of policy that the left was too gutless to admit were real.
Well, that's right. I mean, look, we in Canada are having a breaking of our immigration consensus for a lot of different reasons. Mostly, I think, economic and mostly rooted in infrastructure and a lack of ability to handle the amount of people that we took in under fairly dubious economic argumentation. So, look, I mean, there's a conversation that's happening. Is the European culture as if that is one unified single thing, which not so much. Like, is it actively under threat by hordes of Muslim invaders? I think that's a pretty suspect thesis. I think that you're going to get migration of lots of people from lots of different places. Some of the migration that has undermined, for example, or created a bit of a nativist backlash in places like Britain, for example, is actually migration from other European countries. Right? I mean, like it's actually a little bit more complicated when you dig into it. But look, I don't really want to get into a rehashing of what's right and what's wrong about this document in a European context, because I think that I want to stick to the Canadian conversation here. What about this is relevant to the Canadian conversation? And there's one other point that I would make. So the Wall Street Journal also just came out with an absolutely gangbusters bit of journalism. I mean, I don't even know how to describe this thing. They basically suggest that Trump and people deeply connected with the Trump administration have been meeting with people connected with the Russians, more or less, to carve Ukraine up. Yeah. Essentially,
they're hammering out the terms of the eventual peace deal.
They're hammering out the terms of an eventual peace deal. It's a peace deal that is grossly in favor of Russia it would be a suicidal deal for the Ukrainians. And in this case, the idea of American imperialism is more or less made explicit. They're going to, in order for the U.S. to push for this peace deal, there many people within America and many people explicitly connected to the Trump administration are going to make lots and lots and lots of money, particularly on Ukraine reconstruction. It is an explicitly imperial project that they are engaging in here. Two great powers or something like great powers. I don't know if I want to consider Russia a great power, but meeting in secret to carve up territory that isn't theirs, to the explicit advantage of people who have power within those respective territories. And what got mentioned and what I think was horrifically overlooked in the discussion about this document was one particular line from the Wall Street Journal story, in which part of the conversation about how they were going to carve up Ukraine talked about how the Americans and the Russians were going to carve up mineral rights and other types of passages and resources in the Arctic. The word Canada didn't appear in that one either. Now, yes, America is an Arctic power. It has Alaska. It has geographic interest in the area. But I don't have a lot of faith that they're just going to constrain that conversation to Alaska.
To Alaska and Siberia.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of faith in that. And I don't know why anybody reading this document or reading what they're planning on doing in Ukraine would have a lot of faith that America has some sort of stalwart respect for Canadian sovereignty in the Arctic. I think that that's horrifically naive.
Well, we were saying, said a few minutes ago, Jen, that the Americans leaned on the Panamanians pretty hard about a year ago. Remember the other country they were leaning on real hard at the same time? Greenland.
Another Arctic power. But no, I'm sure they'll leave us out of it. I mean, we are now in the place where we are witnessing in real time an open and explicit reordering of the global environment. Canada is not part of that conversation, and we're going to get what we're going to get. And our new imperial overlords are going to make that decision for us. And unless we get real smart and figure out how we're going to play it, we're going to get eaten alive. And our response to that reality as a nation is that we're going to spend the next 5 years fighting about whether or not we have a pipeline from Alberta to the BC coast.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Let's drop a pin here. I need to take a restroom break, which is content everybody needed to know.
I need to stare off into the abyss. Okay.
That's
the
what I meant.
despair on my face. That's what you should be picking up.
I was offering the plausible alternative of just needing to take a pee, but yeah, I basically meant the same thing. www.readtheline.ca. Like and subscribe. We're back in a moment. Well, that was fun. Great first segment.
Get better. It's gonna get
very
better.
uplifting.
Jen
went and had a little snack. I grabbed myself a fresh drink. So, morale is improving here at the Line Podcast. Jen, I think, we know what we want to talk about in this segment, but I actually think just as we were wrapping up the last one, I think you set it up perfectly. We've just spent about 30, 40 minutes talking about what American foreign policy is. And you and I over the last year, we've been trying to tell people this, but now we actually have one handy White House document that kind of summarizes all of it for us. We are to be viewed as a part of the greater American polity. We are to be folded into an American trading system that will oppose China. They don't talk about us in their cultural values section, but everything they said about the Europeans, they would absolutely say about us if they remembered we existed. Our purpose.
Yeah, they no longer perceive us as family either, by the way.
Oh, I know. Yeah, we're annoying neighbors. We're
annoying woke neighbors. Worse, the worst kind.
Yeah. We are to be, economies that the Americans would prefer to have for themselves will be removed from us and relocated to the United States. We're already seeing that, by the way. Like, this is not hypothetical. Look at some of the deals that have been announced recently about where large companies are deciding to set up their factories. I wish they were setting, or they're whatever. Like, there have been a couple of big deals in recent weeks that have gone to the United States. Because of course they are. The C-suites of these companies are like, yeah, if we put this thing in Canada, it's going to provoke the White House. We put this thing in the States, they're going to love us.
Yeah.
The net effect of all of this is that when Carney said that they want to break us so they can own us. He was right. Like, I actually think that is the thing he has said that is the most accurate. I don't know if they want to annex us, but
no, but they get everything. They get everything they need by just vassalizing us.
For decades, a strong independent Canada was considered a U.S. foreign policy priority and advantage because a strong independent Canada was helpful to the United States. I no longer think a strong and independent Canada is desirable.
Well, here's the thing that I would say is that, firstly, I think that's bad strategic analysis. I don't think an impoverished, angry Canada, the country with whom you share the world's largest undefended border,
it's a good idea.
I don't think that's a great idea. Like, I don't think that's a super idea for America. I don't think that ends well for either side. But okay.
Don't piss off the people that look and talk just like you.
Yeah, definitely do that. Yeah, super. Look, I do want to talk a little bit about Canada in this context and how I still feel like we're a nation that doesn't get it. We're a nation that doesn't get it. And I'm not an expert. I'm not an expert in Quebec politics, but from what I'm looking, it's looking like the Bloc Québécois are coasting to a victory.
Parti
we are
Québécois.
Now being warned.
The Parti Québécois.
See, I always make stupid mistakes when I even try to talk about Quebec politics.
I got your back.
Thank you. I'm sorry. The Parti Québécois. That's what I meant. I'm sorry. It was a brain fart. I know the difference. The general consensus I have from people I talk to from Quebec, who I trust, suggest one thing. One is that a referendum is fundamentally coming. That is now in the cards, probably in the next sort of year to 2 years, to pair with the Alberta separatism referendum. Great. Mm-hmm. And maybe an incursion into the Arctic. So, we're basically going to be fighting a sovereignty war on three fronts in the next year. It's going to be great. Great timing. And also part of the reason why we know that the Parti Québécois is going to go forward with this is largely because they understand the demographics of Quebec are changing, that it's a now or never. It's their last chance. If they don't succeed in a referendum now, the demographics both age and also the sort of the Pure Lane style Quebecois are going to be outnumbered by Anglos, by immigrants, by people coming from Canada, and so they know that this is their last chance to take that shot.
I think they'll lose a referendum, but I think they'll try one.
I think they will try one. I can guarantee you they're going to try one. That is going to eat up an enormous amount of our political and cultural bandwidth at a moment when we can't really afford to have that bandwidth eaten up. And the one thing that does make me a bit nervous, without claiming to be an expert into Quebec politics, but after talking to a lot of Quebec conservatives, is one of the things that a referendum has going in the yes separate trajectory is that there is a real sense from conservative Quebecois that Anglo-Canada doesn't really have a cohesive cultural identity. Mm-hmm. So you're asking us to sign on to a nation of what? What does Canada exist for anymore?
That ain't wrong.
This devolves into a conversation internally about, look, we have a clear understanding of our identity, and it's an ethnically based identity. Let's be clear. It's not a post-national multicultural identity. It's a cultural ethnic identity that is distinct from the rest of Canada, and certainly very distinct from what the Anglo-Canadians would even consider to be an acceptable form of identity. But as the Anglo-Canadian identity has collapsed into, I don't know what we are either, it becomes harder for many conservative Quebecers to look at that and say, and feel any kind of affinity with that. It's like, what are you? You're nothing more than an administrator. That's it. Your national identity is a Service Canada booth. That's it. That's all you got. This is going to be an issue. Mm-hmm. I think that it might be.
Sorry, Jen, I'm going to add even worse news.
Sure.
So I've been talking with my friends in Quebec about this as well, and I'm definitely hearing some of that, and that's going to be a problem. But there's also going to be another fight, another battlefield on which the next referendum will be fought, and it's also going to be basic Canadian state competency. Yep. And
agreed.
They're going to make the argument I'm almost reluctant to say this. At least I'm saying it in English. The argument for Quebec's sovereignty, which I do not support, but if I were a sovereigntist, I would make this argument. I'd make the cultural argument that Jen just made. We know who we are. They have no idea who they are. But maybe we could put up with it if they were really good at getting stuff done. Maybe we'd be like, well, yeah, we don't love them, but like, boy, look at their GDP growth. Or man, they are just a relentlessly efficient machine. That ain't Canada. So, like, we cannot make the economic argument. We cannot make the ruthless efficiency argument. We cannot make the cultural argument. But I do know, and this is why I think they'll lose, I do know what argument we will make. If Carney's willing to do it, I don't know if he is, but if he is, the ruthless pragmatic argument, which is, yeah, you know what? If you guys want to go, go. Here's the deal. Put it in terms that the average Quebec voter whose heart might beat a little faster at the sound of the French language starts going, I kind of like my pension though. Yeah. Like,
well, Quebec has its own pension plan, but
there are ways of,
yeah, look, there's no equalization payment. You don't get to keep the money. If you want to be your own nation, that's fine. You're on your own.
We just tell them what the terms of the divorce would be.
Yeah, and also just so that we're clear, if America is vassalizing us, it's going to vassalize you 10 times faster. I mean, maybe you'll maintain a higher degree of cultural preservation as a result because you're French, but there's no economic future for you here as an independent nation.
We talked to the Cree about the Northern Territories. We talked to the city of Montreal about becoming a Canadian city-state. We talk about if Canada's divisible, so is Quebec. We talk about resources. We talk about debt sharing. We talk about equalization. We talk about services. We talk about, you're right about pensions, but there's still OAS, things like that, right? We just start talking about it. It's like, hey, you guys want to go? We respect that. We will wish you well, and we will remain good friends and neighbors. But here's the deal. Your call.
And also, I think in the current environment, I don't see another sponsorship scandal laying out because I just don't. The idea that the rest of Anglo Canada is going to, get behind this. Please stay with us. You're one of us. Kind of. I don't think that messaging works anymore. I don't think that messaging flies anymore.
I want Quebec to stay, but if they want to go, I want to put a deal in front of them and say, this is the terms we're prepared to offer.
That's right.
That's right. Make the call, and we'll be friends either way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not. It doesn't have to be antipathy. But like, here's how 2026 is laying out for me, from what I'm seeing, is that a high probability referendum with a low probability likely of separation, but even a high probability referendum means that huge amounts of political time, capital, and energy gets sucked up into a sovereignty debate. As opposed to, and also, let's be clear, we as a country can't afford to privilege one province at the expense of all the others anymore. Like, that's going to create sovereignty and unity issues in the long run with other provinces. So Quebec's maximized what it can get out of the rest of the country with this kind of shit. Like, I just don't think that we can continue to make concessions and allowances. So again, we're in the stay or go here, the terms of the divorce territory here. But that is going to happen. That's going to eat up a lot of bandwidth that needs to be actually better spent renegotiating the UMSCA, whatever you want to call it. That is energy that we need to be spending, maximizing our diplomatic capabilities and capital with other nations. I mean, other nations are going to be less likely to work with us or form even cultural alliances with us when they see that we're a goddamn basket case, which we're going to appear to be for the next year. And there's obviously a chance that referendum goes for the separatist favor. Then my concern is, does a momentum for a Quebec separation referendum increase the momentum for a separation referendum in Alberta? To what extent, going back to the Monroe Doctrine conversation, to what extent are both of these referendas subject to foreign interference, i.e. the foreign nation to our south? I think the answer to that question is probably non-zero. And then I think in the next year, there's not a certainty, but a higher than average probability that we get something dramatic happen in the Arctic between the US, Russia, and ourselves. And if there is something dramatic happen in the Arctic, Canada lacks the military capacity to deal with it. So there's a very, very good probability here that 2026 is going to be a maximally chaotic year at a moment when we need to have national unity and resolve in order to prevent our disintegration and vassalization. And I think we're not going to get it.
I feel totally up for that.
Great.
I look around.
I mean, look, no,
and I say to myself,
steelman this.
These are my guys.
Steelman this. What am I getting wrong? Like, what am I missing here? Where's the moment that we pull together? Where's the moment when we figure this out and snap out of our bullshit and go, holy shit, we're in deep shit unless we make some pretty radical changes to how how we function as a nation?
Jen, between the two of us, I'm the more pessimistic and cynical on this one. But all right, you want me to steelman you? So people know what steelmanning means. Basically, steelmanning means offer a spirited counter argument so that Jen can increase her argument. It's just like a challenge function.
Yeah, challenge. I
agree with Jen.
The last 2 weeks, I've been despairing. I've been despairing. I've increasingly come to the conclusion that this country is facing some kind of an existential threat, that the version of Canada that comes out of this is going to be radically different than the version of Canada that came into it. I don't know what that means exactly, but we're in deep shit. I think we're in deep shit as a nation.
Yeah.
And I increasingly am not seeing the corrective mechanisms that are required of a nation facing a potentially existential crisis. I'm not seeing people get it.
Yeah, things, Jen, here's my steelmanning of that. Things are usually not as good or as bad as they seem.
Okay.
We spent the entire first segment talking about what the Americans want to do. One of the things we did not talk about is how incompetent this administration is.
Oh, 1,000%.
So that's one thing we have going in our favor. We want people to take the U.S. document seriously, but that doesn't mean we think they're going to pull it off.
Yeah, I don't think America's going to reindustrialize. I don't think so.
There will be, and it will be incoherent and dysfunctional and spasmodic. There will be a hardening of Canadian resolve under intense pressure. And I'm not saying that as a prediction. I'm just saying that as a human reality. People under pressure get their backs up. And I think this is why the American document from the first segment is a little bit delusional. I think the Americans across the board have underestimated how the rest of the world is going to react to what America is doing. And that will happen here as well. We've already seen some of it.
Because the rest of the country, the rest of the world aren't people, right? Like, they just get to set the terms and everybody else goes along. That's just kind of what they're expecting here.
Canadians are people. I also think, and again, this is the steelmanning of an argument. Generally, I agree with Jen. I do think we have already made some smart changes, and I hate this, but I think ratcheting down the immigration levels is going to provide some short-term relief. It's not going to happen instantly, but we are going to have a bit of relief. Also, recent Canadian economic numbers just out this week were surprisingly robust. So in the big picture, Jen, I am with you. I think I'm more worried than you are. But not all hope is lost. We do have things going for us. I also think, I've already laid out to you what the Quebec, the reply to Quebec should be and could be. I'd also point out on the Alberta separatism front, and I always get in trouble when I speak ill of Albertans, but on this one, I'm actually speaking positively of most Albertans. I've been more impressed by the Federalist response in Alberta than I have the separatist response so far.
That's true. There has been a Federalist response.
But I also think the Federalist response has been more coherent and competent.
I think I agree with that too. So that is, to me, the immune system is reacting in a positive way, the political immune system. So maybe Alberta will be fine. I mean, I think maybe Alberta will be fine. Maybe Alberta will not take a positive momentum for a referendum in one province, and maybe that just won't translate.
Do you know what boat sickness is? That's a good, like the historical thing, boat sickness?
No, but at first I just want to make this one other final point, sure. And that is sort of, I'm starting to come to a conclusion or a fear that Canada is like the NDP of G7 nations. And by that, I mean...
Oh, that's painful. Everybody who's watching on video just watched a grown man develop a full-blown migraine in 0.47 seconds.
And by that, I mean, okay, so, I mean, I've talked about this
30 seconds ago, I felt fine. We're the NDP of nations. thud, thud, thud.
Like, no, I mean, look, what I mean by that is not even an ideological thing. What I mean by that is I've talked about the NDP before. I like the NDP. I like NDPers. NDPers are genuinely really good people who are motivated by really good things, really good positive things. They are often so motivated by really good positive things that they self-sabotage because they would rather fight the good fight and lose than win the fight and have to deal with the moral compromises that are implicit in holding power, right? Mm-hmm. That's kind of my read on the federal NDP. They would much rather be perpetual opposition, but fighting for a better dental care program by forcing parties in power to try and make sort of incremental concessions, because that allows them to be ideologically pure and to feel good about themselves, right? The process of seeking power is really more about identifying with goodness than it is exercising power for a lot of people in the NDP. And that is, I think, the mentality that perpetually holds them back. It perpetually holds them from actually holding real power and being able to make larger scale improvements to how the country and society fundamentally works. I think that we're the NDP of nations. I think that that's our fundamental problem and always has been our fundamental problem. I think we are so in love with our own self-regard that we would rather be perpetually victimized vassal states than to do the hard shit that would and make the moral compromises that would secure and ensure our own collective long-term survival and even our long-term collective influence in an increasingly nasty world.
I think that's, yeah. I see that's really interesting to me because you are describing in slightly different words than I would use something that I think you're correct. I've described it here on this podcast many times as like we've just neutered all the accountability mechanisms, right? Like we've been so rich for so long that we were able to subsidize failure and inefficiency and dysfunction because, well, how bad could it really be? Because like GDP still went up 2% last year and I got a house and a car. And I think kind of what you're describing is that same, we haven't wanted to make hard decisions. And I think the NDP might be a little more ideological, whereas Canadian bureaucratic dysfunction might be a little bit more sort of just conflict averse, but I think we're kind of generally describing the same thing here. But again, I don't peddle false optimism here, but I do want to tell you what boat sickness was, because when you were talking about Alberta, that's what it is. Historically isolated communities, like kind of the cliched example was like an island with like 1,000 people on it off the mainland. A couple of times a year, the supply boat would arrive and everybody would get a cough. And no one understood why they would get a cough, but it was because viruses that were circulating on the mainland, they were exposed to it. Everybody got sick at once, and their immune systems rallied. Maybe the entire Western Hemisphere is about to get a real nasty case of boat sickness, where we're going to be all simultaneously presented with a very different America, but we'll adapt. It's going to suck. Everybody's going to be sick for a while. The old and the sick might die.
Look, we will adapt, and some version of Canada will continue to persist. I believe that's the case. There will be an adaptation period, but that adaptation period gets harder and longer the longer we're in denial about the fact that the boat's bringing in a virus.
Yeah.
Right?
I know. I do think, and look, I've been harder on Carney than you have, but I do think Carney fundamentally gets it. I think Carney badly underestimated and may still be underestimating how dysfunctional the Canadian state is as a tool.
Carney gets it. He signs a necessary MOU, which doesn't guarantee or promise anything, and he's been shat on it in the mainstream media for the last 2 weeks because how dare he even consider selling? No, this is. I'm going to make this point. I made this point on Substack. I'm going to make it here. The Elbows Up crowd were all for shutting down the oil to the United States. That same Elbows Up crowd can't tolerate selling that same oil for the same national interest. That tells you everything you need to know, right? Because that tells you that the Elbows Up crowd really aren't that interested in the national interest and what is sincerely in the national interest. What they're interested in is using this particular crisis, this age-old bugbear, which they've always hated, in order to further the things that they've always wanted to do. And there's nothing that is more damaging to any kind of concept of national unity or national cohesiveness than that. Because of course the West is going to look at this and be like, "You're full of shit, elbows up." Like, you know what I mean? Like it just disintegrates the unity on this one. And I can't even listen to the CBC right now because it's filled with panelists who are like, "I don't understand why Carney would sign an MOU with Alberta. Doesn't he know they're the odds that he'll get more than 6 seats in the next election in Alberta are non-existent, and he'll potentially lose 2 or 3 seats in downtown Vancouver." Like, we have conditioned ourselves to think like this, to think in these sort of internecine, mutually self-destructive ways in which every action a politician makes has to be rooted by a superficial desire to gain 1 seat at the expense of another seat here, right? This is tactics. This isn't strategy. The reason why Carney signed an MOU with Alberta is probably just because the MOU with Alberta is in the national interest.
Yeah, and he'll write off a couple of Liberal seats in BC, but he might save the country.
There you go.
Yeah,
and we have an entire political class, an entire political punditry class that can't see that and can't think like that. And
well, we're hyper specialized, Jen. We're only focused on first order consequences, right? So
that's right.
People who spend all their time thinking about politics look at something like this and they go, "What's the political effect of this?" I remember a couple of weeks ago, I was talking with Peter Sankoff, the lawyer, on an On the Line episode, and he was saying some of the tweaks that the immigration discount in sentencing. He was saying, if we're going to fix the criminal justice system, this doesn't even make the top 100 list of problems. And I said, yeah, I understand that, but there are second and third order consequences. This might be the 100th most important problem in the legal system, but it might be the third most important country for the rest of our fucking civilization. And Carney, his first order problem might indeed be losing some BC seats, but it might be a pressure valve to save the Federation. And I haven't seen a lot of that being discussed and acknowledged, and I don't get it either. But yeah, I'm with you, Jen. The elites in this country, and you and I are kind of elites. They're dumb. They're dumb.
Well, maybe we're dumb.
No self-preservation instinct.
I don't know. It's just. Anyway, look, I want to talk about Katy Perry because I'm a dumb elite. But I also have to pick up my daughter pretty quick here. So can we put a like and subscribe there and tell people to check us out at www.readtheline.ca?
Yes, but let me add one thing, and I'll keep it to 20 seconds. You're mad at the elites for what they're saying. You want to know who I'm mad at?
Who?
All of the people who told me over the last 15 or 20 years that all the columns I was writing about why Canada needs its own military were stupid because the Americans were always going to defend us. Guess what, guys? You were right, but they're going to do it on their terms. My way would have been better. Like and subscribe.
All right, Matt, I do want to end this on something of a positive note. Our former Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, is living his best life.
Good for him.
He is now dating pop star Katy Perry. And he recently surfaced on X because he took his girlfriend to some kind of photo shoot with former Japanese Prime Minister Yuko Kishida. And I believe, yes, Yuko Kishida's wife, Fumio Kishida. And I'm going to apologize for mispronouncing those names. I'm sorry. I'm just stupid.
Are they former or current?
Elite. No, they're former.
Okay.
So, I mean, look, I think we were all in agreement not to talk about Justin Trudeau anymore. And the fact that he was dating a pop star allowed us to do that because we could say, hey, that's not our problem anymore. We cover serious issues here at The Line. Unfortunately, Justin Trudeau is taking his pop star girlfriend to go do photo shoots with the former Japanese prime minister, and now it's look.
You okay there, Jen?
I want us all to put this era behind us. I want us all to move on and be happy and harmonious and unified as a country. And we just can't do that if Justin Trudeau is even seeming to be taken seriously by other world leaders right now. With Katy Perry.
You know what Justin Trudeau did?
What?
He kissed a girl.
And she liked it. Look, I want him to live his best life. I want him to date Katy Perry. I want him to show up in the tabs. Like that was what he should have always been doing. And that's great. That's where he belongs.
So you're offering the Gerson corollary then to the Trudeau doctrine, which should be, we will not talk about him so long as he sticks to pop stars and avoids current or former global leaders.
Yes, I think that's fair. I think that's reasonable.
I can live with that. Yeah, no, I'll endorse that. Yep.
Can I also just say,
ding.
how much of this relationship is real and how much of this relationship is a total PR stage? Like, we know that celebrities do PR relationships. This is a thing. You shouldn't take it seriously to Hollywood celebrities who are quote unquote dating in the tabloids. Like, that might be true. It probably is a setup. This might be a setup. I think that Katy Perry is aging out of pop stardom. I think that I can see a version of Katy Perry that's trying to transition her brand into something that's hoping to be taken more seriously. She did that weird astronaut stunt. She's now dating a former prime minister. I'm sure there's a UN envoy to speak to child world hunger somewhere, in the offing for her. Like, it makes sense to me why she's engaging in this from a PR perspective.
But what would he see in her, Jen?
Well, no, I mean, she's Katy Perry. She's hot. I get it.
Right.
I get it.
That was, sorry, forgot.
No, I get it. But if you're dating Katy Perry and you're Justin Trudeau, I think that you should confine yourself to the tabloid sections and not the grown-up table. Thank you. That's all I have to say about this. Thank you for your consideration and time. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your attention to this matter.
Thank you for your attention to this matter. Thank you. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
Roar. Last Friday night.
On that note,
those are the only 3 ones I know.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe, www.readtheline.ca.